Good morning. Clearly, I'm the short member of this team here. All right. Every time I go to flick something on my shoulder here, I notice my heart and realize that I am loved. That felt really beautiful this morning. Today's sermon is all about choices, and I want you to think back as a child to when was the first time you were given a choice about something. Oftentimes we hear that children get frustrated because they are not given choices. So in education, we're often told that classrooms work best when we can give children choices that don't stress out teachers too much. My earliest memory of a choice, however, was at a Christmas party. I was probably about 4 years old, and my parents took us to a Christmas party with some family friends. And as they would tell it, I was a little bit nixy. I did not behave. I don't remember not behaving, but what I do remember is that we had been told that when we got home from the Christmas party, we were going to be able to stay up late. That was number one. And we were going to be able to watch It's a Wonderful Life on television. Now, for those of you who don't remember those days, television used to be that you could watch the movie one time each year with commercial, and if you didn't get home in time, you had to wait a whole nother year till you could watch It's a Wonderful Life again. I see some nods. So this was a huge deal for me to be able to stay up and watch It's a Wonderful Life. And in the car on the way home, my father decided that he would choose 2 acceptable punishments for me, and I had to drive home to decide which punishment I was going to accept in order to move forward with our evening to be allowed to watch It's a Wonderful Life. I won't tell you what those 2 choices were, only that I accepted the more painful one with the promise that I could watch It's a Wonderful Life and not have to go to bed early. I think after that, when I think of choices, I often think of taking quizzes in school. How many of you remember taking multiple choice quizzes in school, especially ones that you had to fill in the bubble letters? And wasn't it always exciting when the choices worked out so they made patterns? I don't know, that's just me maybe. So I thought I would start this morning by giving you a bit of a musical pop quiz. So I am on sabbatical. I feel like I need some help with pop quiz. So this is what I've been listening to this week. Do you know how many genres of music in 2023 are recognized on Spotify? Now, if you don't know what Spotify is a digital platform. I make no assumptions nor judgments. I learn things from my students every day. Spotify is a digital platform that categorizes, people can put all sorts of music, and they sort it by genre or style. Does anyone want to guess how many genres of music as of the end of 2023 were recognized on Spotify? C. That was a really good try, everyone, but you're wrong. The actual answer is D. As of the end of 2023, 6,000 different genres of music were recognized on Spotify. In 2017, if I had asked you the same question, the answer would be B. So you see in a mere few years how wide and broad our musical tastes have changed and widened. As we journey through Lent together, one of the things we have talked a lot about is what does it mean to be embodied and to use our body, not just what we can see, but also the different parts of ourselves. Our bodies, yes, but our senses and our feelings and our emotions and our preferences. So to that end, we're going to play a game that my coworker uses a lot in her classroom to get to know each other. And I thought since it's Reception of New Members Day, it's always good to get to know each other just a little bit better. So we're going to play a game called This or That. Perhaps you have played it before. I'm going to give you 2 choices of very, I think, weighty and important decisions that need to be made. If you agree with choice A, you're going to move yourself by standing and moving toward the aisle. If you choose that, or choice B, I'd like you to stand and move toward the window. Now, if you can't stand or don't feel comfortable, simply maybe direct your attention towards your preference. If you're joining us online, feel free to put any of your preferences, A or B, into the chat box. Once you've made your choice, chat for just a moment, and I do mean that just a moment, because John took up a lot of my time with his extra long introduction. Just a moment, and then we will come back. I have 3 of them to do, all right? So if you choose choice 1, you're going to move toward the aisle. Choice 2, move toward the window, and chat with those around you about your choice. Very difficult decisions to make, so I'll just brief you. Here we go. Here's number 1. Would you rather spend your vacation in a city or at a mountain cabin? Oh, we had some people who knew right away. Oh, okay. All right. Share your choice. Talk to those around you. Wow. Come on back. That was an easy one. This one causes a lot of dissension in our family, so we'll see if that's true for yours. Creamy or crunchy? What's your peanut butter preference? Creamy or crunchy? All right, come on back. Does anyone want to admit, like in our family, you have both kinds in your cupboard just to save? Okay, thank you. We've just given up. All right, and number 3, would you rather cook or do the dishes? That one seemed to have a lot of conversation. Curiouser and curiouser. While for some of you, these may not seem like very contentious or weighty decisions, unless you, like me, live in a creamy versus crunchy scenario at our home, the passage that we are going to look at today feels weighty. The choice that we're going to look at in this passage feels weighty. I don't know if you are like me, but when I read the book of Mark, I often feel like I'm swimming lap after lap after lap in a swimming pool that never seems to end. I feel like this narrative never stops. It moves along at sort of this breakneck speed, and I often don't feel that there is a moment to pause, to rest, to breathe, to sit with what Mark is trying to tell me. So if this is you, we are going to pause, and we're going to hear this passage the way the early listeners would have heard it, by hearing it. So as Liz comes forward and shares this passage with you, I would ask you to do the following 3 things. Try to let go of any preconceived notions you have about this text, as it probably will be familiar to many of you. Try to allow your brain to live in the moment. Don't skip ahead to what comes next. And number 3, can you try to hear it as if you are hearing it for the very first time?
And to help with this is the Eugene Peterson's The Message version, so the language will be a little bit different, even for those who know it well. Jesus then began to explain things to the disciples. It is necessary that the Son of Man proceed an ordeal of suffering, to be tried and found guilty by the elders, the priests, the religion scholars, to be put to death. And after 3 days, rise up to life. But Peter grabbed him in protest. Turning and seeing the disciples wavering, wondering what to believe, Jesus confronted Peter. Peter, get out of my way. Satan, get lost. You have no idea how God is at work. Then calling the crowd to join the disciples, he said, any of you who intend to follow me, to come with me, have to get out of the way. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. Do not run from suffering, embrace it. Follow me, and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. So self-sacrifice is the way, my way, that leads to life, real life. He said this so that they could hear it simply, clearly. If any of you, what would you gain to gain the whole world, but give up you, the real you? What could you trade your soul for? If any of you are embarrassed by me and the way that I'm leading when you are around your fickle and unfocused friends, know that you will be an even greater embarrassment when the Son of Man comes in all the splendor of God, his Father, with an army of the holy angels.
When Naomi asked if I'd preach this Sunday, I thought maybe it was a hazing activity when I saw the passage. And the team went around with some very interesting inside jokes this week that I won't trouble you with now, but were very interesting as we've wrestled with this passage from Mark. Like many of you, I've heard this story before, perhaps with some of those demonstrative words like, "Get behind me, Satan," which we'll deal with in a minute. But as I dug into the passage this week, I was amazed to discover the parsing out of two Greek words that Mark chose to use that really helped me to slow down, partially because I don't speak Greek, so my apologies for pronunciation to those of you who do, but also to understand what this text is saying in a very different way. The first is this: upisomo. In Greek, upisomo means behind me, or after me? Unsurprisingly, if you know this text in a more traditional translation, the first time this phrase appears is in Jesus' rebuke of Peter. The story lays out just a bit like this. Jesus has decided to speak plainly to his disciples about what is coming. He is going to tell them how the future is going to unfold, and he's not going to hide it from them. He's not going to say it in a riddle. He is going to speak it plainly. The path forward, as many of you know, does not align with Peter's ideas or those of the disciples about what a Messiah should do or about how a Messiah should behave. He has the nerve, or I would question perhaps the courage, to question Jesus openly. Jesus responds by calling Peter Satan in every translation I looked at. Now, Satan is not the horned, pitchfork-carrying devil you might imagine, but in this context, Jesus is using the original meaning of this word, an adversary. This word has been pulled out several times throughout Scripture to talk and name others who have gotten and come in contact or conflict with the Creator's plan. At that moment, Peter becomes an adversary to this different, radical, new kingdom path of Jesus. Jesus tells him to upisomo, get behind me. In other words, if Peter was unwilling or unable to be open to this new way of Jesus, he would become simply another adversary in a world already that did not understand this radical new way of Jesus. But here's the fascinating part. In the very next verse, verse 34, Jesus invites the crowd to become part of this conversation. And if he says that if anybody wants to follow in this new way, they must give up their own agenda, take up their cross, and follow him. But what is interesting is that Mark repeats this Greek phrase, upisomo, to go behind me, or to after me, that he used just one verse earlier. The second use of this phrase, upisomo, is not necessary in Greek, since the Greek word to follow automatically carries with it the sense of going behind me. You don't have to spell it out, so usually it isn't. Why? Why would Mark do this? Why would he repeat this phrase, upisomo? Perhaps because he wants to create a parallel to his challenge to Peter from the previous verse. Or he wants to restate to Peter, to upisomo. Perhaps he is letting his listeners know that everyone will upisomo, get behind Jesus. But our choice really lies in how we choose to do that. The first choice is like Peter's initial reaction to Jesus' kingdom plan, to hold on to everything the world tells us matters: wealth, status, power, might. These things put us in direct contradiction to Jesus' call of love. We upisomo, we get behind Jesus, we turn and move in the opposite direction, because his way does not match what feels comfortable or easy or helps us fit in. Or, as in verse 34, we can upisomo, get behind Jesus as a disciple. We can learn, we can watch, we can observe, we can look at total love in action. The birth of new kingdom come. What does that kind of getting behind look like? I think the last three verses give us a clue with another Greek word. Another word that Mark chooses to use in this passage is the Greek word sehi. Our English scriptures often translate this word as life, a word that shows up 4 times partially in the translation from Eugene Peterson, but in more traditional translations. However, in Greek, psyche really means soul. It's much more than this physical body or physical life that we lead. It is actually the very core of who we are, the very core of our being. When Jesus asks us to give up our life, our psyche, to opisimu him, to follow him, he's not talking about being someone's doormat. He's not talking about rejecting ourselves and the care for who we are as people, or always choosing a path that involves sorrow and pain or self-denial. But what he is talking about is becoming in our soul, our psyche, the very core of our being, the person that the Creator intended us to be. This is the kingdom living. This is our choice. And it will change who we are and the world. I've read this story to the children about Martha Cunningham Dolby, or Maddie. Are any of you familiar with Martha Dolby? I see some nods. She's become someone who's very fascinating to me, and as we leave Black History Month and we enter Women's History Month, she is someone who I've sat with a lot this week as I've thought about what this means to use our very core of our being to get behind Jesus. I'm going to read some excerpts from an article that appeared in Brethren Life and Thought called Recovering African American Voice and Experience in Brethren History, a biographical essay on Maddie Cunningham Dolby. I'd encourage you sometime to look it up and read it if you haven't. It is fascinating, and I don't have the time to sit and read it all. Maddie and her brother Joe were the first African American students admitted to Manchester College in 1900. And it was very clear at the beginning of their time there that they experienced a lot of racism at the university, so much so that they were not allowed to eat on campus for the first year. While Maddie's daughter says that her mother never talked about experiencing any kind of discrimination at the college, there are several resources that say this was their reality. However, in the second year of their time at Manchester, a fellow student named Otho Winger decided to gather a group of like-minded students who would invite the Dolbys to eat with them in the school cafeteria. That group surrounded Maddie and Joe and ate with them every day in the school cafeteria. So much so that after that year, pictures of the two of them begin to pop up in the glee club, playing sports. That one act changed the course of their time at Manchester. Shortly after graduating, Martha, or Maddie, was invited by the General Mission Board to establish a German Baptist Brethren church in Arkansas, in the small town of Palestine. Located in the northeastern part of the state, Palestine was near the county seat of Forest City, which is named after the Confederate general Nathan Bedford Forrest, the founder of the Ku Klux Klan. It was a part of a terribly impoverished region where most African Americans worked as sharecroppers and lived in dirt floor shacks while surviving harsh winters in substandard structures. Maddie did not shy from taking on work in Arkansas, and she realized that the magnitude of her quest, which was hampered by intense poverty and local racism, and she was always pressing the General Board for funding. She continued to fight and advocate for the people of Palestine, oftentimes not receiving the funding that was sent to other congregations or even overseas. In 1907, she continued to struggle with health, and she moved back home to Indiana and began working with the Frankfurt Brethren in Ohio. We don't know how much money the district gave or the Brotherhood gave to Maddie's founding congregation in Frankfurt. However, in an effort to express their commitment, the Frankfurt congregation took an unprecedented step when on December 31st, 1911, during Love Feast, they installed her not only as the first woman, but as the first African American minister in the Church of the Brethren. She worked there for many years. However, the family had to move and ended in Urbana, where a very different congregation greeted them. I think it's important to notice, and this was not told to the children, but the drive from where Maddie and her family lived to this new congregation was 25 miles, which maybe doesn't feel too difficult for us, but in 1917 would have meant a significant commitment. However, their commitment to remain brethren was strong. For 7 years, they drove 25 miles one way to the small Church of the Brethren that was closest to their home. 25 miles. As the only African American couple or family in the congregation. In 1924, the leadership in that congregation changed, and they were met one morning at the door of the church and told that they were no longer welcome as before and encouraged to find a place of worship closer to home. At that point, Maddie and her family made what they felt was a courageous protest step and left the Church of the Brethren. However, I think it's interesting. A couple years later, her husband passed away, and the man who gave the eulogy at his funeral, was Otho Winger, the man who had sat with them daily at the lunch table at Manchester College. What does this have to do with opissimo or siha? One thing I appreciate about Peter's story, and the reason it is included in so many of the gospel texts, is that it represents a step on our journey. Peter's story is a lot of ups and downs. Peter's story is one of humanity. I think so often we in the church, either little c or big C, have a hard time telling the painful parts of the story, the parts that don't always make us look so good. We like to tell the parts where we follow into these new and beautiful new paths of kingdom living, but we often don't like to tell the parts where we get behind Jesus in a different way, becoming an adversary. May we continue to tell more stories like Maddie's, a story of deep commitment to the living into who we are, even when that's hard, and even perhaps when those around us are not ready to live into that following. And may we be as open as a congregation to living and getting behind Jesus in this new way of kingdom living. Opissimo. As we sing our closing hymn, Lord, You Have Come to the Lakeshore, you will notice it is written in Spanish and in English. I would invite you, in whatever language feels most comfortable or most uncomfortable, to sing in whatever language you choose.